So welcome everybody. I'm Bill Collins, VIC Ventures and Community Co-Facilitator. My other co-facilitator, Joe Fay of Facets, is not able to join tonight. And then the incoming co-facilitator to replace Joe, Brenda Faison, is also not here at the moment. I'm hoping she'll be able to drop in, but if not, they'll be able to watch the recording. So tonight is about advocacy tools on behalf of those in need. And how do we use tools that we can use to make sure that the Ventures in Community mission is carried forward. So Ventures in Community is an association of some 36 nonprofits and faith communities in the South County Route 1 corridor. And its mission is to advocate for and serve those in need in this area of the county. And tonight's meeting is intended as an informative session on some ways to advocate on behalf of those in need. And there'll be an initial presentation from Kim Bobo, and I will introduce her shortly. That's Kim up in the corner, or wherever she is on your screen. Followed by an introduction of a case study, the current need to replace the Kennedy shelter at Fort Belvoir with a modern updated building. And then we'll have about 20-minute breakout rooms for a small group discussion of how this case study can be addressed in terms of vision, methods, and action consistent with the ethos of Ventures in Community. So this meeting is for learning and dialogue in line with Ventures in Community's mission to advocate for and serve those in need, and its vision of a diverse and welcoming community with essential and adequate resources that reach all segments of the population. Conversations in the breakouts and in the chat are expected to be respectful, courteous, and guided by Ventures in Community's mission and vision. The moderator, or the host, me, may limit participation for anyone who is not respecting those guidelines, and I may disable any features that are being misused. I just give that warning in advance so that people know in case something goes haywire. But we hope we'll have no Zoom bombing or anything else like that going on this evening. So I want to introduce Kim Bobo. The steering committee wanted to invite Kim to give us a little bit of information about some of the ways that the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy engages in advocacy. Kim is a nationally known promoter of social justice who leads VICPP's advocacy, outreach, and development work. She wrote the book on faith-based organizing. Kim joined Virginia Interfaith Center in 2016, where she mobilized the historic faith advocacy campaign and played a leadership role in the statewide Healthcare for All Virginians Coalition, advocating for Medicaid expansion, which passed in 2018. Kim moved to Virginia from Chicago, where she founded and served as executive director of Interfaith Worker Justice, the nation's largest network of people of faith engaging in local and national actions to improve wages, benefits, and conditions for workers. Prior to that, Kim was national organizing director for Bread for the World and an instructor at the Midwest Academy. Kim has a BA in religion from Barnard College and an MA in economics from the New School for Social Research. She is a member of Wesley United Methodist Church, where she sings in the choir. A fellow choir member. Kim served as the choir director at her previous church for 25 years. So I want to turn to Kim now to kind of give her presentation. She has a PowerPoint to present. And then when she's done, I'll do some introduction of the case study, and then I think we'll break out into the breakout rooms. Kim, you tell me when these things are supposed to take place. All right?
All right. And Bill, you may need to, because I've kind of built some of the case study into the PowerPoint, okay. So you may need to jump in there and add some background when I get there. How's that?
Now in advance. I can do it really quick.
No, why don't we,
okay.
I'll just call on you just because I've kind of got it woven in. Okay. That'll be just fine. Just fine. Well, thank you, Bill. And thanks, Pam, for inviting me to be with you this evening. I have done advocacy for quite a while, and so it is a pleasure to share some of my experience and some tools that you can use when you're thinking about advocacy. Now, I have put together a PowerPoint. You'll notice I'm not 25, so I'm probably not as swift with the PowerPoint as some of my colleagues, so you'll bear with me here. Let me see if I can share my screen and get it up. The other thing is I won't be able to see you if you have questions, so just, you know, speak out and stop me. Okay,
people want to put questions in the chat, they're welcome to, and I will try to capture them for you.
Okay,
if people don't feel comfortable
share screen. All right, now we're going to go here to the PowerPoint. And now I'm going to go from the beginning. Okay, can you see it?
Yep.
Yay, okay.
And so while Kim's speaking, if everyone could mute themselves, that would be great.
All righty, so what is advocacy? It's an action that speaks in favor, recommends, argues for a cause, supports or defends or pleads on behalf of others. And it really, it's a very close relationship with organizing, and organizing and advocacy to me really go hand in hand. And the difference that organizers talk about is advocacy, you're doing it on behalf of somebody else, and organizing, you're doing it on behalf of yourself. But I actually think they go together many times, because I think what we are often doing, trying to improve the lives of low-income people, is not just about them, it's about us and the kind of society that we all want to live in. So I think they really aren't just about somebody else, it's really about us and our society. When you do faith-based advocacy, which is what I have done most of my life, we're focusing on love of neighbor, we're engaging people out of their faith, we speak and act in love. We draw from our faith-based practices and resources. It's not that, I think the tools are much the same, but often the motivation and how we draw people into the work is slightly different from a more secular approach. For us at Virginia Interfaith, we engage people of faith and goodwill in advocating economic, racial, and social justice in Virginia's policies and practices. And I think what we're known for right now is actually sort of focusing on a narrow set of issues and really digging in and actually being very effective and winning on some public policy. And so again, we do that by really trying to have an effective approach and strategy, which we're going to talk about going forward. So we work in both the General Assembly, we also work on some policy outreach, and then sometimes with some key boards, and any of that is enhanced through civic engagement work. Okay, so mostly though, and I think when you all are thinking about advocacy, we're probably thinking about advocating with elected leaders. Now, again, sometimes we're working with and trying to advocate with administrative people, but often it's with elected leaders. And so then we fundamentally have to ask, well, what really matters to them? And for most of them, they want to get reelected. And so that means, you know, they've got to have votes from constituents and they need money. So they're concerned about that. They also are concerned about what the media says about them, because it influences both votes and money. And, you know, they're human beings. They care about policies. They care about things that reflect their values. And so I think we're always trying to appeal to them on all of those different points of view. So again, it's not that we are only going to appeal to them in terms of their values or only on sort of the votes that they can get on this, but really I think it's a combination of all of that. I mean, we saw that we led the effort in Virginia. We're one of the key groups on the faith community side on abolition of the death penalty. And we had a number of legislators in the Senate, which is where we struggled to get the votes, who said at the final vote, they were voting for abolition, so against the death penalty, even though they didn't personally accept and believe that. because they finally had been convinced that it was the will of their constituents, right? They'd heard from enough people that it changed their votes, and they wanted to represent their districts. So I think the key thing that we want to do when we think about any advocacy is we need to make a plan. So, and it's called a strategy, and it's an overall plan for how you're going to win on the issue, how you're really going to move the agenda that you think needs to happen, how you're going to engage your base of people, and how you're going to build your organization. So when we're winning on an issue, we're working on a solution to a problem, not usually the problem, right? You educate on problems, you organize on solutions, right? And in an organizing or advocate campaign, it's usually something that you can win from somebody, right? If you can't define how am I going to win it from, you know, this legislative body or that legislative body or this decision maker, it's probably not an organizing and advocacy campaign. It might be something else, but, and it's almost always measurable and very specific. Your base of people depends on what your organization is, right? It's based on your mission. So for us, it's people of faith, right? It's really the base of folks. And whatever you do, you want to make sure that you're engaging your base and that your strategy is focusing on engaging the base that's really your mission. And then building the organization, again, is very specific. So you want to increase the names in the database. You want to raise some money. You want to gain some new contacts in the media. It's not, I believe that it's really not just enough to win. We want to win. It's not just enough to engage your base. You should do that too. But you want to strengthen your organization. So on whatever the next thing is, you can be more effective because you've got a stronger organization. So we're going to work on a strategy, a plan that does all three of those things. So I use a system called the Midwest Academy Strategy Chart. This is kind of what it looks like when you put it out on a big 5 pieces of newsprint, which we don't have today. So we're going to have to do it with a PowerPoint. It has 5 different columns. I'm going to go through what each one of those categories are. So column 1, you usually just spend a few minutes thinking about what's your vision, right? What's your long-term vision? Now, don't spend hours on this. Now, I know a lot of you are church people. We can spend many hours on vision, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to have a very clear vision. But then we'd want to talk about what exactly do we want to win and by when, right? What's the time frame and what exactly do we want to win? And then it's worth spending a little bit of time about, you know, if we can't actually win that, what might be an acceptable second best, a fallback? What's negotiable, what's not negotiable? And again, it doesn't mean that the first time you hear no from a decision maker that you go to your fallback, because the first response almost always is no. But it is useful to have done a little thinking about this ahead of time. I was sharing with Bill that I helped lead a large citywide low-income housing campaign in Chicago a number of years ago. And we were fighting for additional money for low-income housing. And it was so important that we had figured out what was negotiable and what wasn't, because at the end we had decided that we wanted extra money, but it had to be targeted on low-income families, because the city was spending a lot of its low-income money on families that weren't really low-income. And so this campaign, we wanted not only to get more money, but we wanted it really targeted in some very specific ways. And when it came down to getting close to winning, the city was willing to give the money, but didn't want to give it targeted to low-income people. And so we, that was not negotiable for us. And so we fought for another couple months on it till we could eventually get that in. And so it becomes really important to think about that stuff. Second column, what are your organizational considerations, right? So what do you have now as an organization that you can put into the campaign? And then how, at the end of the campaign, will the organization be measurably stronger and better? So for me, if I'm working on a major campaign, whether it was our Medicaid fight, or right now we're doing a whole effort around trying to get paid sick days. We won a partial victory for 30,000 home care workers this last year, but we've still got another 1 million workers in Virginia who have no paid sick days. So when I'm doing a campaign, part of what I want to do is I want to raise some money around it, because we're going to spend organizational resources on it. And I want to use it to get more people in the organization. And so I will have very specific goals around, I want to add 3,000 names to the database on this campaign. Because again, I want my organization to be stronger. Column 3, this is where you look at your constituents and your allies. Constituents are your base. They're people in your organization or that you want in your organization. Allies are people or organizations who can help you win, but you don't really, they're not appropriate to be in your organization. And the reason for distinguishing between the two is you want to make sure that the bulk of the work that you organize is focused on your constituency. Right? Because otherwise, if the allies are doing all the work and you're spending all your attention on the allies, what's the point of your membership, right? So you got to spend the bulk of your time focused on engaging your base, your constituency. Column 4, this is the decision makers. In organizing lingo, they call it the targets, but I often switch that because target sounds like we're going to shoot them, and we're not planning to shoot any of them. But we want to be clear about who has the power to give us what we want, who can make this real decision. And if you can't figure it out, you're not going to be able to have a good strategy. You have to figure out who has the power to make a decision. With legislative campaigns, you usually have either a committee that's more important than everybody else, or you have some swing votes on something. And so you want to be able to think about where people are and whose votes you're going to work on. And the point here is that you're not, I mean, it'd be nice if everybody agreed with you, if you could convince everybody, but that's not really what we're trying to do. We're trying to win. We're trying to get a piece of policy through. And so if you've got 30 members of a city council and you're trying to equally work on all 30 of them, you're just not going to be very effective. Whereas if you can say, okay, look, 10 of them are already for us, 10 of them already are going to be hardcore opposed, then there's 10 in the middle and we have to get 6 out of those 10. Then you can really focus your energy on those swing votes. And that's actually what we do all the time in working on the General Assembly, right? We got to get the votes out of Commerce and Labor Committee, and these are the 5 swing votes on Commerce and Labor Committee, and we're going to focus our efforts on those votes. On our paid sick day campaign, we did 350,000 targeted text to 6 Senate districts who were our swing votes on this stuff. So again, we didn't have, if we'd spread those out, it would have had much less impact. This is also the column where you want to think about who opposes us. And if it's just people who disagree with you, but they're not going to do anything, well, it doesn't really matter. But if they're really going to organize people against you or organize money against you, you want to think about, are there ways we can talk with them, we can work with them, we can address some of their concerns. You can't ignore the opponents, right? If they are working against you actively, you've got to pay attention. We are trying to get a bill through right now to remove the exemption for farm workers on the minimum wage. Right now, when the minimum wage went up on May 1, farm workers aren't covered. We're trying to change that and get them covered. But we've got a problem with the Farm Bureau, right? They are a major opponent on this one. And so we're trying to figure out what would it take to get them to not oppose what we're trying to do here. The other thing to do is in this column is to think about secondary targets. In organizing, that means who has more influence or power with the decision maker than you do. And with legislative folks, it's almost always their large donors or the people who run their re-election campaigns, the volunteers. So again, you want to look at those and try and say, well, do we know any of those folks who are large donors to the campaign or who lead their volunteer effort? Because again, if those folks would help us, they're going to have probably more influence with the decision maker than we will. Column 5. This is where you get to have the fun. This is the tactics. Tactics are what you do. It is what the people in column 3 do to the people in column 4 in order to win column 1 and build column 2, which is why you can't really talk about tactics, the things you're going to do, until you've really thought through the previous 4 columns. Now, again, you can do the 4 columns in different order, and I usually start with 1, go to 4, and then come back and do 2 and 3, and then you get to go to 5. But you can't, if you don't do it this way, if you start jumping to what are we going to do, you are likely to come up with some things that you're going to do that won't be focused on the decision makers, that won't involve your base and won't build your organization. So it's very important to think about this strategically. Again, we talk about you want to work strategically and not tactically. We've all seen organizations who, you know, my favorite one, there was a group that had a campaign and they ended up doing some sort of prayer vigil at the state capitol, you know, on whatever the issue was. And so some other group heard about it and they decided to do, you know, a prayer vigil at the state capitol, but the General Assembly wasn't in session then, right? They'd just taken a tactic out of the blue and it made no sense. And so you can't just take tactics out of the blue. They have to be within the context of your overall strategy. So again, I just said this, we're jumping around. We're going to jump around a bit on the strategy. So I want to talk as an example, not to develop your campaign that VIC might do, but rather as a learning tool. I want to talk about this shelter issue and use it as an example of how you should, what I think you should do in terms of thinking about strategy and how people like me who do this work on advocacy and organizing, how we think about these things. So Bill, I'm going to call on you to help me here. So I just made up a vision for what you all want, to create a humane shelter system in the county that helps single adults to become housed and thriving. Is something like that about right? You're on mute.
Pam is nodding. I mean, I think broadly speaking, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, it's you all can wordsmith all this stuff, but you get the point. Just something very simple that keeps in mind where we're going. So you might have a very specific goal, like, you know, we want the Board of Supervisors in Fairfax to approve going forward with a shelter and building affordable housing at the Beacon Hill site and make a decision by the end of the summer or the end of the year or something like that. So Bill, do you want to jump in here and give a little background on this issue? Because you all shared with me a little bit about it, but maybe not everyone on the call knows about the issue. So,
and Pam can join in too. So Fairfax County had a 10-year plan to end homelessness between 2008 and 2018. And in 2018, the Office to Prevent and End Homelessness issued a report on its efforts and challenges in reducing the homeless population by 46% over 10 years. In the past couple of years, the homeless population has risen slightly here as elsewhere. So there are some things about the the counting here in the county. But the current shelter, so there are a number of shelters in the county, and Pam can tell us how many and where and which ones she deals with. But the current shelter for South County is a worn out 100-year-old water pump house on Fort Belvoir. And a replacement was funded in a 2016 bond issue, and the new shelter is now scheduled to be built by 2026. That is 10 years after funding was secured. And that's a long wait for the homeless community, which is desperate for help. And the new shelter is slated to house the same number of individuals, 50, as the current shelter. Are you right, Pam? It's 50? Yeah, okay. And it will also provide about 20 efficiencies, supportive housing for homeless individuals who are elderly or disabled. The county purchased land to co-locate this new shelter and supportive housing with the Pendoff Fire Station at Beacon Hill Road and Richmond Highway. And this seems to be, at this stage, the only or the best site that is in hand to do this within a reasonable amount of time. And I can put in the chat the Fairfax County information about that and the chat and so on. Let me pull it up and I will just put those in the chat so that people can go look at them if they wish. And then also the Ventures in Community website has information on shelter needs, and also has something I will mention again later for asking for further information or expressing support for the replacement. Kim, would you go ahead?
Yes. So again, on any issue goal that is that you decide to work on, you obviously have gone through some process internally to make the decision that that's what you want to work on. We have at Virginia Interfaith, we have a fairly long process. We survey all the members. We have research that is done. We take it all to the board and we have a set of criteria, and, so it takes a while to get to whatever your issue is. So, this might not be the issue that you all want to be advocating on, but we're just going to use it as an example right now. And I think it is close to what VIC as a position has taken. But again, this is not a conversation per se about the issue. This is really trying to look at a process for how you do advocacy. So I then jump to, the decision makers, like who's going to make this decision. So with this, you have a board of supervisors, right? You have 9 district supervisors and an at-large chair. But the supervisor who probably has more power on this is the one whose district this is in. And I understand that's Supervisor Daniel Stork. Is that correct? So, you're essentially going to need 6 votes. And so, at some point, if you were really doing a campaign, you would want to understand where everybody is. And, you'd probably figure out that there are 3 or 4 folks who completely support it, a couple folks who completely oppose it, and then there's several in the middle. And essentially, you're going to want to focus mostly on those, as well as the supervisor whose district it is in, right? Because, he's in the most difficult position. And so he clearly needs to hear from people. On those secondary targets, very important to think about the donors and the volunteers on their reelection committee. And then again, are there opponents who are really organized, and are there ways to address their concerns and reduce opposition? And if so, think about how to do that in your tactics. Now, good ways to learn about these decision makers, because you do need to know about them. So obviously, you can find out what district you're in, which legislative district you're in, via the Fairfax County website. And frankly, you probably have lots of people who don't really know who their supervisor is. So you need to be able to help people on that. Then I think it's always a good thing to sign up for your legislators' Facebook, their Twitter, all their social media stuff. So you can learn what their positions are, what they're saying about the issues. And then there's VPAC. If you don't know VPAP, it should become your best friend. VPAP tells you where money comes from and where money goes in Virginia. It is a very great website. So this is one of the gentlemen that is often a challenge for us on Commerce and Labor Committee. This is Dick Sasslaw. He chairs Commerce and Labor Committee, so he's very important. And you look down and, you know, who is his biggest donor over the years? Very clear. And so this clearly affects what he does and what his positions are on things. This is, I looked at VPAP on Daniel Stork. And what was interesting, it appears to me that an awful lot of his money was the big 93. If you went down and looked at it, it's mostly loans from himself. So again, he's self-financing a lot of it. But you have, you know, you've got, you know, Scott Survell, you've got Kathy Tran, you've got a number of people down here, and the Virginia Education Association. You got people here that you may know, you may have relationships with, and they may be able to talk with Mr. Stork as a supporter with you on this. Column 3. This is looking again at your constituents and your allies. So, you know, who are the constituents? The faith community, the shelter residents, shelter volunteers. Anyway, I don't know who all you all view as your constituents, but they should all be listed out here. And then there's likely to be other allies on this fight that you should look at. Then we're going to go to column 2. This is, you know, how you build VIC, how you build the organization. So how many people do you have on your steering committee right now?
You're muted, Bill.
Sorry, I click on it, it doesn't check. I think it's about what, 15 or 20? 15, I think it's around.
Okay, good, let's say it's 15. So one of the goals of the campaign should be to add another 3 people on the steering committee, and to add them from communities that are otherwise not represented, right? Again, that can be a way to build the organization. So right now you've got 15 people who can help work on it, and you want to add 3 new people as part of building the organization. Are there any staff from any of the congregations or the social service agencies who could work on this campaign, who could really help staff you? How many names do you have in your database right now? And how can you, through this campaign, be intentional about adding names to the database? We do this a lot in terms of trying to get additional people to sign petitions and send emails to their legislators, and we capture the names along the way. So how do you use the campaign to concretely build the organization? And then column 5, this is again where you have the fun. You think about the things that you're gonna do, right? How do you engage your constituents in pushing those decision makers, those targets, in ways that win the issue and build your organization? These are things that you do. Now, in our advocacy, there's kind of your basic tried and true, these are the advocacy tools, and then there's some more interesting ones. So again, letters, phone calls, emails, direct meetings, town halls. These are sort of tried and true kind of tactics that people often use, that you all could use. And then there's sort of more interesting ones, right? Can you do a prayer vigil? We were working on predatory lending a couple years ago, trying to curb the excessive lending rates for low-income people. And we did prayer vigils outside title loan companies around the state as part of the campaign, and generated a lot of media. On our abolition of the death penalty, we did prayer vigils at lynching sites around the state, including one in Alexandria, really trying to make the link between lynching in Virginia and executions. So again, you try to do them in kind of really thoughtful places. We do a lot of op-eds and letters to the editor, community forums. We obviously testify in hearings, bring a lot of people to testify in hearings when it can be in person and not just virtual. And increasingly, we're doing quantity texting, which basically all it takes is a finger that can go like this a lot of times. So I want us to spend a few minutes in some breakout groups, brainstorming some tactics that you all might consider on a campaign like this. What are some things you could do, some tactics that would engage your constituents, that would put pressure on these decision makers or help limit or address the concerns of the opposition, and that would build VIC, right? What are things that you think would be effective and that your constituents would be comfortable doing? So I think with the magic of Zoom, Bill is going to get us into some small groups to brainstorm some tactics. And if one person in the group can be responsible for jotting down some of those best ideas, we're going to take about 20 minutes and brainstorm some ideas, and then we'll come back and share some of those ideas and have time for questions about how to use this whole strategy system for doing advocacy. Maybe before we do though, are there questions right now before we go into the small groups? Is everyone still with me?
I think we are. I think I did.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
So I'm going to assign, I think, six breakout rooms with 5 people in each. All right, and let's see how that goes. And okay, Keith Davey has to leave. Thanks, Keith, for showing up. See you soon. Okay, so here we go. So you should get something that automatically assigns you. Yeah.
We're back. Excellent. Okay, I want to hear some of the great ideas.
We've got 8 people. Some of them haven't rejoined yet.
Oh, they're not? Okay, I'll wait a minute.
Yeah, let's wait. And I noticed that the occasional person popped in to the general meeting like late and suddenly assigned to a room and appeared like it, 2 minutes closure. So
I've never quite been able to work the meeting group room stuff quite right.
Well, I do apologize for not getting it as 20 minutes. It said 2, and it was a typo. And I do apologize. That sort of lost us a little time. But
2 minutes. Yeah.
We have 26 people back. I think that was what we originally started with.
You were up to 28 total.
Oh, well, we probably lost a few along the way, but that's fine.
No, that's 26 is pretty good retention.
Okay, so I want to do some quick report backs. I know our group came up with a bunch of good ideas, so but I'm sure other groups did too. So can somebody who's got the notes from one of the groups
Kathy, do you want to start?
Sure. These notes are off the top of my head because I'm actually winding yarn. But our group was great because all of us already knew each other and we know this issue inside and out. So we were trying to think of how to basically, it's really, we need Dan to sign off on it is the bottom line. And how do we get support for him to do that? And how do we get the opposition to at least be educated on the issue? Because a lot of it's emotion and not really knowledge. So we did a little brainstorming on that and we came up with, we were thinking maybe, we know the Mount Vernon Council has come out in opposition. And so maybe maybe they need to come. One of the ideas we had was to have like a luncheon just for a couple of key people at the Bailey's shelter so they can actually be in a shelter and visualize it as opposed to what they're thinking it is, and get a better idea about that. And we decided that the people who are against it are probably going to stay against it. So like you said, get those 6 to 10 people who are kind of in the middle and convince them. And we also like the prayer vigil idea that would really bring attention to it, and maybe to do that on site. Do we have any other key ideas, group?
Those are good. I like both of those.
Yeah. Oh, we did have one other idea. There are some panhandlers at the Beacon Mall area, which is right next to this spot. And we wanted to know if they were residents at the Kennedy shelter, or they're just some random people who show up, and what does that mean? Because if it, what does that mean? So that was the other idea that we had.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I'm going to get the New Hope Housing Outreach team to go there and see who they know,
Mhm.
if they can find out.
Okay, another group.
I can report for our group. Hi, everyone. I am Sarah Yurgo. I go to Hope United Church of Christ. This is my first meeting. So first, I really appreciate my group helping me to bring me up to speed. Hope is off of Old Telegraph Road in Alexandria, and there's a whole bunch of us who live in the Beacon Hill neighborhood. I live in Bellevue, so just down the road. So our group talked a lot about, again, like trying to humanize the issue and working in the neighborhood. So thinking about getting like a fact sheet or some stories together, quick snapshots to really put a face and a story to success stories, who is homeless, who are the homeless, just to dispel some of those myths. And then on the backside, listing all the faith-based organizations, and then doing some door-to-door canvassing to really have one-on-one conversations with some of the neighbors to help with that. We also talked, if we're collecting stories, if there's capacity to do like a short informational video that could be used both in educating congregations and then also possibly doing some targeting on Facebook and like really doing some paid ads and targeting like the zip codes in the neighborhoods to really try and reach the neighbors and make sure that our campaign message is reaching them. Yeah, the PowerPoint presentation and especially doing specific outreach to church communities along the Route 1 corridor and others that are in the neighborhood that might have constituents who live in that neighborhood, and getting their leaders on board via a sign-on letter, and then like releasing that at a prayer vigil or a press release publicly, and doing like, once the PowerPoint presentation education at the communities, at the church congregations are done, ending that with a letter writing campaign to their supervisors. And I think that's it, but yeah, just like re-emphasizing targeting the churches in the neighborhood as like the people to really get to join the campaign.
That's great.
Yeah, great ideas.
Very good.
Great ideas. Another group.
I'll speak. And I'm a visitor to VIC, so I appreciate your letting me come in. So many of the same ideas came up for us. Victor noted that the VIC itself used to be an advocacy group and then became an information sharing group and seems to be on its route back to being an advocacy group. So this issue is one that could help build the organization back to its roots, back to becoming a more advocacy group, and that perhaps the members, the people coming to VIC, need to be trained how to be advocates back at their own organizations, how to talk to their groups, their churches, their organizations about different issues and get them activated. They also had ideas, we had ideas about going door to door, flyers, and maybe having tables at Beacon Mall or in the neighborhood parks where people could come and talk.
Good idea.
Not
Nice.
just tables at Beacon Hill Mall, do a prayer vigil at Beacon Hill Mall. I've done prayer vigils at Ballston Mall. It's not very scary, and you can get a lot of prayer requests and a lot of people interested.
Nice. Nice.
Uh-huh.
Good. Anything else there?
Well, that there are probably a lot of undecided people living in the neighborhoods who are not part of the opposition. They're just nobody's talked to them, but the opposition's been out talking to people, and nobody that is in favor of the shelter has gone door to door and made friends and asked for concerns and talked to people. And so if we could go out in pairs with masks on and make contact with a good bit, and if we've got 6 or 7 different groups that are willing to do this, you could go block by block and it doesn't have to be overwhelming for any church or organization joining in.
Nice.
Does anyone know what the opposition Why
yeah.
are they in opposition?
Mary Payton can speak to that.
Yeah, their main concerns are the usual ones. They're afraid that the homeless people are dangerous to them physically and personally, and that they are probably sex offenders and will increase crime, and also that will drive down their property values. And they seem to have studies that they say confirm all of this, although I have a great many studies that say that's generally not the case. So right now everybody's just pulling out their studies, you know, like I got this and I got that one. You're not true, I'm true. So that's not going anywhere.
All righty. Anne, you want to represent our group?
Okay. Well, we talked about possibly, you know, going door to door in the opposing communities and taking maybe a formerly or a currently homeless person with us who you know, would be able to, you know, articulate how it is easy to become homeless. We talked about getting 30 or 40 pastors to sign a letter in favor of the shelter and then delivering it to Dan Stork and having some event like a press conference around that. We talked about maybe doing an online petition, trying to get people to sign an online petition. Trying to find people in neighborhoods near maybe a recently built shelter. David had an example of this, finding people who opposed the shelter initially, but once it was built and got going, they changed their mind. And David said that there is a shelter in Fairfax, recently built, and it's a gorgeous place, and that the neighborhoods around it have just kind of adopted it. And trying to present a shelter as more of an opportunity for people than a detriment, you know. And
yeah, that's good.
Okay.
So on other groups, on the remaining ones, are there other new ideas that weren't already mentioned? There's a lot of sort of overlapping ideas, which is great.
A little bit from ours, but I'm going to ask, if you haven't looked in the chat, if people could send the notes from your breakout discussions to me at info@venturesinCommunity.org, then I can collate these ideas for the various groups that are discussing this whole issue. We have a wider group that's that includes a couple of representatives from Ventures in Community, but others as well. And then there's also the Ventures in Community Steering Committee. And so these can be ideas that can be adopted, adapted, figured out, you know.
Great.
But the one thing that we were discussing was what other possibilities are there for reaching out to constituencies? And one that we are working on is the question of businesses and the Chamber of Commerce, and that this could be a win for them to have a shelter there that will certainly provide services for people that right now are in the parking lots and in front of the businesses. And so it could be something that could be very positive. The other that was mentioned, and I hadn't thought about this before, was whether any of the fraternal organizations like Elks, Lions Clubs, and these sort of things could be a useful venue for expressing some, the nature of the shelter and why it's important.
Yeah, good, good.
Our group number 2 was also into canvassing, which I also think is really crucial because the most noise is being made by people in a fairly small area, and they're not the dominant population of that area yet. And also the idea of humanizing the homeless people, either by taking them canvassing if they were willing and so brave as to do that. But most of the fears are coming from people who really don't see them as human, regular people. They're quite exaggerated, and we didn't exactly figure out how to do that. But the problem of getting people to see the homeless people as human beings, not dangerous beasts, was key.
Mary, we talked about having maybe some of the staff from the Kennedy shelter speak, because they would be amongst the people that are there now and could, shed lights as to the type of people that are there, putting that face you were talking about.
Great. Okay, are there any groups we haven't heard from?
Hi, my name is Yoko. I was part of group 6, and we came up with a few strategies. A lot of it kind of overlaps, but the first one is, again, to emphasize in town halls, not to oppose, but to present supportive information, to continue that in the chats and that sort of thing, but not actually get on the level of moral high ground. I had a suggestion of having a former homeless person testify. Personally, I'm a person who has received mental health services, and so I know what it's like to almost be homeless. Unfortunately, I have family members that have been supportive of me and that sort of thing. So how do you get someone to share that they are a success story? I also believe in presenting facts and myths on homelessness. I think that we came up with that in the group, that facts and myths on homelessness are important for people to know, and maybe post that on an online bulletin or website. And then emphasize again in some sort of discussion manner that the shelter is full service and it's not going to be, and people are not going to be turned away on the street during the day. And then find out, like, research who are the leaders of the opposition. So whoever is, just giving challenges the most, who they may know, do our due diligence and research on that. Thank you.
Nice. Well, I think we're about at our end of our time. I just want to say, we in a relatively short time generated lots of great ideas. And what one would normally do in a planning group is you would do pretty much like we did, where you kind of agree on what's the goal, you agree on the decision makers, so that everybody's focused on that. You agree on the constituents and the allies. You talk a little bit collectively about how to build the organization, and then you divide people up and let people brainstorm, and then come back and kind of group all the ideas. We had a lot of folks a lot of ideas around a prayer vigil and around a clergy sign-on, and then there were a bunch of ideas around canvassing and how to do that, and fact sheets. So you group them, and then you go through and kind of flesh out the ones that you really organizationally want to do and that you've got the capacity to do, because some might be brilliant ideas, but you just don't organizationally have the capacity to do it. And you have a plan then for moving forward that you've developed collectively with a lot of your key folks. So, so again, I think you all did a great job today. I feel like we've come up with some really great ideas. And I hope that it can be both an exercise for how to do and think about advocacy, but also might be useful in moving forward on the campaign itself. So let me turn it back over to Bill, and I thank you for letting me be with you this evening.
Thank you, Kim. And yeah, and I want to remind everybody that if you want further information about the shelter project, or wish to show your support, you can go to www.venturesincommunities.org/news, which has the everything about this, and you can sign on. We would like to hear from you, and you know, and if you want to make comments, there's also a way to connect and send a message or comment to Ventures in Community. So I urge you to do that if you are so inclined, and because that gives us a base of people that we know we are interested in engaging with this issue. I think it's going to be a period of months and maybe years to deal with this particular issue, and so. As I gather is typical for this kind of situation. Pam, did you want to say anything about this evening or in closing?
Well, I guess a couple of things. First, thank you all for your interest in this issue. It is absolutely critical that the Kennedy shelter be replaced. And I think there are people who don't understand that need. Mm-hmm. But the biggest thing is this misperception of who is homeless, and how we help people to understand that they are first and foremost people, not first and foremost drug addicts or rapists or whatever image folks have. And we've got to keep working on breaking that down. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not surprised at the reaction. I mean, I will say that this is not shocking to me. We just got to plow through it. I didn't ever expect anybody to roll out a red carpet and say, y'all come. So we just have to help them find a path.
I've got a question, Bill and everybody else. What do you see as next steps from whatever information you've gathered today? I mean, how soon do we do a bus to Bailey with some of these key people like Dan Stork and the supervisor for Lee District, and some people from Mount Vernon Council and Rotary and United Community and Good Shepherd Housing. In other words, the people who have a degree of power in their respective organizations and can be talking the talk or moving the idea along. I mean, what's going to happen with the time we've invested this evening and the ideas we've generated? How will that be used?
Well, there's a group of people interested in the shelter that Mary Payden put together. That is not, it's not under VIC. It's a separate group, which I'm going to make sure gets all this information. And then Ventures in Community has a steering committee, which will be meeting this coming week, and this should all be on their agenda for how we approach this. Because Ventures in Community has to also digest and consult together on how we do this. So, Kim, okay. I see Kim smiling, and okay.
Just add that the people on the other committee are Vic has all the experience and the history and the good knowledge and intentions and message forming, etc. But it lacks capacity in certain areas that are needed for advocacy. So what we've done is tried to bring in people who are sympathetic to the issue, but also have some of the skills and capacity that would help move it along.
Okay,
So there will have to be some decisions made about
next steps.
farming out next steps and farming out actions to people, to carry out. So.
Because you have
Got a
to
lot
have,
to build on tonight. So thank you, everybody, for doing it. Really good
So
work.
We are at 8:33, so I'm gonna close and thank all of you for attending. And it's thoughtful group, and we have many things to consider, and then
are you able to capture all these names?
for who's attended.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, I think there should be a list of attendees
There is.
finished.
Okay.
Hope so. Anyway, we'll figure it out. I will have the chat, the chat with anything that was in there, and if you will, your groups will please send me your notes by email to info@venturesinCommunity.org. Then I can compile all that together. Okay. Thank you.
I need to
All right,
thank
Kim,
him.
I want to express
Yeah.
thanks to you. And Karen, did you say something?
I think we need to thank Kim for helping us go through this process.
No,
tonight.
I'm thanking her now. Thank you, Kim.
My pleasure.
Thank you,
for-
Ken.
for
Thank you.
giving us, and if you made some revisions to your PowerPoint there when we were talking at the beginning, if you would send me the current one. Okay.
How can we get a copy of the PowerPoint?
Put it on the VIC website.
Say
Was-
what?
I said, put it on the VIC website.
We can do,
Yeah, that's fine.
and
Please.
we can also send it to the people who are here
Yeah.
as well, just direct.
Bill, you can get a list of all the people attending about 30 minutes after the meeting, and I think we should send them all the PowerPoint and a recording of the meeting,
Okay, yes, yes.
so they can maybe further it to some of their constituents.
Okay,
Good idea.
wonderful.
Can you repeat that email? info@something.
At venturesincommunity.org.
Okay,
Yep, it's on the venturesincommunity.org website. You'll see what our email is too.
okay, yeah, that's good. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank
thank you.
all.
Yes,
you.
very, very good.
Alrighty.
Thank you. Good night.
Night, and
Bye,
Have a good night.
everybody. Thank
Have a
you.
good night. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank